Just waiting for Joe. How's everybody doing? Rocking and rolling. Good to see everybody from around the world. I'm doing very well, Alma. Oh, hello, Joe. How you doing?
Hey, guys.
All right. How's your day going?
My day is going brilliant, thank you. How was yours?
Going really good, thanks. Thank you for joining us here on Instagram Live. Very exciting.
Yeah, no problem at all. This is my very first Instagram Live, so I'm very excited.
Oh, very, very, very cool. This is my first co-Instagram Live, so I'm glad that it's working so well so far.
Excellent.
Oh, well, without further ado, why don't we get into some cool questions and get to know the episode Genius Mind, which is Joseph C. Evans. All right. All right. How did you discover episodes, and when did you start writing on the platform?
Yes, so it was all the way back in 2014, and I came to episode via a really unconventional way. I was actually promoting my Secretary Sequence novels on Twitter at the time, and a member of the episode team actually DM'd me, and they said that they had seen my Secretary Sequence books, and that they were intrigued by the fact that they had video game elements to them. And they said, we wonder if you'd be interested in checking out our brand new app episode, and if you'd be interested in becoming a paid writer for the app. So I thought, well, let's check it out. And the same member of the team said, explained everything to me, how it worked, and that it would involve choices and kind of adventuring, and it would be like a visual format. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is perfect for me, because I absolutely loved the fighting fantasy books by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone when I was a child, which were kind of those choose your own adventure books where you would reach the end of a chapter and it would give you an option. It would say, if you want to battle the dragon, go to go to page 5. If you would like to go off into the forest to forage of mushrooms, then go to page 2, something like that. And I absolutely loved those books as a child. I also really loved point and click adventure games like Broken Sword and Monkey Island. This was pretty much a combination of the two. So I checked out the app, and the first thing I thought was, wow, this seems way more like a kind of a fashion dressing up app for very young girls than I was expecting. It had a very different art style than I was expecting. And I thought, well, okay, this may not be what I initially thought it would be. But I thought, do you know what? Let's just write what I want to write, which was the Phoenix Prophecy, and just see if it will work with this kind of art style that isn't really designed for the kind of story I wanted to write. And so I thought, I'm going to go ahead anyway, and I accepted the proposition. I said, this sounds great, let's do this. And when the Phoenix Prophecy came out, thankfully readers did enjoy it, and it seemed to work. At that point in time, the majority of stories on the app were very, very light-hearted and frivolous, and I think that probably helped me in a way, because the stories on there were pretty much designed for that art style. Because mine was very, very different, I believe that might have made it stand out a little bit. So that probably helped me in the very beginning. At this point in time, I was still working almost full time in a bookstore, and I had been in this bookstore working, behind the checkout for the last 10 years. And I really wanted to get out of there. I wanted to write. I wanted to be a writer. I'd written these 2 Secretary Sequence novels, and I had self-published them because I couldn't get a traditional publisher. But unfortunately, the money I was making from self-publishing wasn't enough to allow me to escape retail. But when Episode offered me this job, the money that I would make from the Phoenix Prophecy was just enough to allow me to quit being a sales assistant
Yeah.
and actually
You
being
can
a full-time
be an
writer.
author.
So that's
Yeah.
the story of how I got into it.
Oh, that's such a good story, and like not one that I've heard before. That's really cool. That's really cool. So you're original from all the way back. You're one of the first like episode writers. That's really neat. And your stories were the first ones I read on episode. I got on
Oh,
there and I'm like, oh, these all look like dressing games. And then I was like, oh, Phoenix Prophecy, what's this? And totally read it all in like 3 days. It was awesome.
oh, that's really great to know, actually, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make something to appeal to fantasy readers who, at that point in time, there probably wasn't really anything else on episode for them to enjoy. So I'm really happy to hear in person, you know, that actually did happen with you.
Yeah. It was the whole reason I stayed on the app and then eventually started writing, because the original stories really weren't for me, but everything that started with your stories and then I think spawned more of a new genre on episode, that's what inspired me to stay and be like, you know what, I can contribute to this. This is a cool community. And I think, you know, episode's huge now. You know, everybody's included. And yeah, very cool.
And now you're a fantasy writer as well. You're featured as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with Recently Royal. Yeah, and that's been an absolutely wild ride. Very, very different from anything I've done in traditional books. So very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So the next question is a little bit for our new readers and new writers. What are some common traps you see episode authors fall into, particularly at the beginning of their journey?
Okay, so I get a lot of DMs from writers saying that they've started a story, but they've become stuck with the plot. They don't know how to get that plot back on track. This is always due to a lack of planning. I was in the same position time and time again when I was younger. There was actually, when I was about 16, 17, 18, around that time-ish, I wrote about 100 to 120 A4 pages of a novel. And I really thought this was going to be the one, you know, this was, because I tried a few before that as well, even though I was quite young. But I really thought this was going to be the one. But unfortunately, I didn't know where the story was going to end. I knew how it started and I knew what the middle was, and I did not know what that third act was going to be. And it completely destroyed it because I got to that point and I was just, it was like a brick wall of writer's block. And I had to scrap it and I never went back to it. So after being in that position time and time again, I finally figured it out with this, with City of the Falling Sky. I figured out that planning was key. And after planning that one, beginning, middle and end in quite a lot of detail, I was actually able to write that one. And it was the first novel that I was able to complete. So just from first-hand experience, I know that planning is the key to not getting stuck with a story. So my advice to any writers who haven't tried writing before or who haven't been able to finish a story before is to really plan in detail.
That's excellent advice. You know, I think we've all, as authors, experienced that at least some point, getting to that point where you just don't know what step number 2 is going to be, and maybe not even knowing how you're going to end it, but having a really amazing story up until that point. But sometimes the ending really, you know, it's going to determine what happens in point A and B before you get to C. So you need everything. You need all the pieces.
You do. You really do.
All right. So this next one's a little bit fun. So obviously on episodes, there's lots of pressure for a lot of people to have a popular story. Sometimes you need to be a little bit sexy. When you're writing a story and you're writing a romantic storyline or subplot, how do you find that balance between like, oh, cute, and like, oh, like, you know, it's a little bit too far? Like, so how do you find that balance? Like, particularly as a male author too.
Yeah, I mean, I think I find that balance by completely avoiding it if I can. I I guess with this answer, I've got to be a little bit careful because I do have opinions on the kind of stories that generally get featured and that get promoted quite heavily, and I don't want to kind of get too much into my personal opinions, but this kind of needs to kind of push erotic stories. It bothers me. It really does bother me. And I'm not the only one. Obviously, all you have to do is look at the forums, and you can see how kind of disgusted people are by the stuff that does very well on episodes. I mean, basically, in any kind of media business, erotica will do well. It's just human nature. But I mean, I'm hoping that further down the line, that needs to write that stuff into stories to become popular will disappear. And I think the way to do that, in the politest way possible, I would love for episodes to, not promote that stuff as much as is happening right now, just to kind of set the tone and hopefully maybe encourage writers to be more focusing on a good story and lovable characters that you can fall in love with, and really great plot twists, really great stories that hook you, and that it doesn't have to be about erotica. So yeah, I think it's definitely, I've worked with the episode team on some of my stories, the more recent ones, and have been encouraged to put that stuff into my stories, and I have done it, and I did it with The Last Goodbe, and I wasn't completely satisfied with that. I went quite public on Instagram saying that I wasn't completely satisfied with the way that story went. So yeah, I think my advice for anyone that's in this situation where they're thinking, should I put these kind of sexy scenes into my story to get more reads and to be featured and to get more popular episodes, I would say, yeah, if you're happy to do that, that's great. That's absolutely fine. But I would love if kind of everybody rallied into saying, you know what, if I don't want to do this, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna sacrifice my integrity to get more reads. And I think the more people that if they're not comfortable with that kind of thing, the more people who write just the story that they want to without pushing that stuff in there, then the more the episode team will see that it doesn't need erotica to do well. Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, we drive the demand, right? It's supply and demand, and we say what we want. I kind of feel like a good way of saying it, like you've really made me think about it with what you've just said. Like obviously romance and interpersonal relationships are such an important part of the human experience. And in that way, we can't omit that from our writing. But at the same time, we shouldn't over dramatize it or over characterize it just to get reads. I think that's important, is that it takes your writing to a next level if you can look at things in a way where you bring in these real life experiences and real life relationships and explore that in your writing, just like any author does with real meaty stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. And yeah, I feel I do feel very positive for the future of episode. I think as time goes on, the app will kind of evolve with time, and erotica is one of those things that does well instantly, and so I understand why this has happened on the app. But just like traditional publishing, obviously, in traditional publishing, we do have things like Mills and Boon, but that isn't the greatest, that isn't the largest market in traditional publishing. There's so much else out there that's incredible and kind of has more to it than just that. And I'm hoping that episode will kind of like evolve in the same way, so that it will kind of move on from the Mills and Booney style stuff and expand into loads of different genres that can include romance or doesn't need to include romance, or just everything. I would love to see everything on episode, all kinds of stories.
Yeah, everything. We need a sci-fi genre ASAP.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right, so this next one is a little bit sci-fi. This next question: if you could hop in a time machine and go back and talk to young author Joseph, who might not even know that he's going to be an author yet, what one piece of advice would you give him?
So aside from the planning stuff, which I already mentioned, that would be one of them. But other than that, because I've already talked about it, my piece of advice I think would be really valuable is, I would say, don't listen or act upon any criticism unless that criticism is repeated to you more than a dozen times. The reason being, when I was younger, I would hand out my unfinished pieces of work to family and friends, and I would listen to what they were giving me advice on, and I would say, okay, well, I need to change this, I need to change that, and I would end up changing so much that it would sometimes not really resemble the original idea that I had. Then when I finished and released City of the Falling Sky, I remember getting a review, and this review talked about how much they absolutely hated a certain part of the story. And then I think it was the very next review underneath it, and that was talking about how the very same part of the story was their most favorite thing about the entire book. And in that moment, I just thought, well, this is it. I've been listening to everybody's advice, because a lot of people will give advice as though they're an expert, and they will give advice as though they think that they know the absolute truth, and that you have to do this, otherwise you're not going to succeed. But yeah, in that moment when I saw those two reviews side by side, I thought, you're never going to please everybody, and what one reader hates and what one reader thinks is the downfall of your book will be another person's best thing about it. So I only take criticism and act upon criticism nowadays if a lot of people repeat the same thing over to me again and again, and then I might think about it. Even then, I probably won't change it, but...
Yeah. Well, you got to write what you like, and if you like it, that's all that matters. Because if you're writing something, you're like, well, so-and-so said that, maybe Sekri should have green hair and then also be a girl. Like you can't, if you're not writing your truth, it's not your truth. You can't write it. You can't write it with your heart in it. It's very important. Yeah, very valuable lesson that everybody watching should take into account. Don't listen to the haters. Just take in some creative criticism and then move forward.
Absolutely.
Oh, very good. It's very good. All right, so this next question is a little bit in the feels. And it's one of my favorite questions I like to ask people. What was the first book that made you cry, and why?
Well, I do cry quite easily, so there have been many. But I do remember.
I love that you could say that.
the first time I really cried quite badly at a book, and the first time I was really deeply emotionally affected by the book, was The Amber Spyglass by Philip Pullman.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's difficult to explain why I cried without giving away what happens at the end. But without spoiling it, for anybody that has read it, the scene I'm talking about is the scene with the bench.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. You're going to make me cry now. Let's not talk
about
it.
Just thinking about it.
Next question.
So for anyone that doesn't know what this book is, it's the third book in a trilogy called His Dark Materials. The first one is called Northern Lights, although in some countries it was renamed to The Golden Compass. And the second book is called The Subtle Knife, and the third is The Amber Spyglass. There was a movie made of The Golden Compass, but I have not watched it because I read all the reviews at the time and everyone said it was absolutely dreadful. And I can't bring myself to ruin the memory and to ruin my experience of the book. So I have no idea what the movie is like. I'd be interested to hear if anybody has watched that and if anybody has an opinion on it. But yeah, I really got emotional with that book. Some other series that have made me cry over the years. One of them was a little known series called Broken Sky by Chris Wooding. Definitely check that one out, guys, because it is absolutely incredible and not a lot of people know about it. So Broken Sky by Chris Wooding. Another one is the Wind on Fire trilogy by William Nicholson. And I actually cried at the very last line of Thief of Time by Terry Pratchett, which even though that book is a fantasy comedy, I really found the very last line of that book to be really poignant. So, yeah.
Man, Terry Pratchett, he is like, man, top of my list.
Yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
beautiful.
Oh, I love Terry Pratchett.
That was gorgeous. All right, so this next question we spoke about earlier. And so we're going to pose this question to the commenters. Alma, this interview is probably going to go for another couple of minutes. We're going to pose this question to the commenters, so let us know what you think. As a writer, what animal, real or mythical, do you think Joseph Evans's spirit animal is? So we want to see everybody's thoughts on that and make them really good.
I couldn't decide.
Because we were having a hard time thinking of something.
Yeah. Do you know what I was going to say is I think if I was going to be an animal and I was allowed to pick a fantasy creature, maybe I'll pick a Moogle from the Final Fantasy games because they always seem so happy and they just sit around saying "Cuppo." but you guys can think of a better one than that.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, a seal, Pegasus. Those are good so far. I like seal. Very happy. You know, Lords of the Sea.
Just flapping around.
Very cool.
A phoenix, a phoenix. There we go. Why not? A phoenix for the Phoenix Prophecy.
That's actually, there you go. Spot on.
Awesome. I like that one.
All right. So in our next question, and this is something that I'm always interested about when I'm talking to male authors, or I'm talking to friends who write. What is the most difficult thing for you about writing female characters or from a female perspective?
Okay, so I mean, this was definitely an insecurity of mine when I first started on episodes. I knew that the audience was about 98% female for episodes. The episode team had told me that themselves. So I thought, well, it's probably best if I write, with a female protagonist. And yeah, it was a real insecurity because I'd never written from a female point of view as a main character before. And it was just due to lack of experience. I mean, when I was writing the Sekri sequence, obviously Sekri is a 14-year-old boy. And I could just draw from my own experiences of being a 14-year-old boy myself. I know how I felt at that age, and I know the emotions I went through. And, Phoenix is a young woman as well. And, it's at a very pivotal stage in her life. And I really didn't know if I was going to be qualified to write from a point of view because, I hadn't gone through that myself. But, I mean, luckily, there was no, what's the word? There was no kind of negative comments or anything about me not knowing what I'm talking about. And people seem to enjoy reading about Phoenix, and it didn't seem like anybody had an issue with me being a male writer writing from a female point of view. And because I've done it so often, and since then, I feel like it's become second nature now. And I just I don't even think about it. I've written from a female perspective so much that I'm straight into the role, and it doesn't even occur to me that I'm writing from a different gender's point of view anymore. I guess, you know, I just got to think of it like, well, of course, in the Sekiri sequence, I was writing from the point of view of Sekiri, but, you know, there were plenty of female characters in there. So it was the same as doing that,
Yeah.
really. I know it's a little, when,
Yeah.
you know, the main character, you're a little bit more in their head, but I always, well, when I'm writing traditional novels, I always write in third person. So I'm not completely in their mind and in their head. And of course, on episode, it's in the third person in a way because, well,
Yeah.
I mean, just from the camera is a third person camera. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I you know, that's the gist of it. I did feel unqualified, but thankfully the readers' reactions gave me the confidence to keep going and to know that I was, I think, doing a decent job of it.
Yeah, well, you know, honestly, like I think that more often than not, it's great when somebody approaches a character of a different gender than them, you know, with much the same mindset as that they would the same gender, because we're not all so different. And usually when you overthink, like, okay, so what would a guy be thinking right now? Or like, what would a woman be thinking about right now? You can tend to almost overdo it in your brain. And then you just
Yeah,
end up with this caricature of
that's a
what
really
you think.
great point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So I
think
think, you know,
yeah, definitely, like you're saying, you should just think what would a human being be thinking right now? Yeah.
yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, very cool. All right. So our next one, how many half-baked ideas do you normally come up with? Or like how many, you know, sort of drafts do you have in your mind before you go, you know what, this is Glitch Girl and I'm writing it?
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? Strangely enough, usually it's none, because I tend to have the mindset of, you know, I feel like I can take any situation and mold it into something of a good plot. So when I think of my initial idea, instead, I feel like I might be wasting time coming up with other ideas. So I take the one idea and I just somehow make it work, and I'm determined to make it work no matter what. So with Glitch Girl, my initial idea was that I wanted a character to, I wanted a character to be called Zero and to have his kind of signature thing be glitching people's devices to count down to zero. So that was the initial idea, and then I expanded the whole story around that. In terms of kind of inspiration, I am always thinking of new ideas of story. They're kind of popping into my head, and I'm thinking, well, I'm currently writing one story. I can't just start a new one straight away. You know, I need to shelve this for later. So that happens quite often. And one time that did happen was with the Ember Effect. I actually came up with the idea and the story of the Ember Effect a long, long time before I wrote it. It was years back before I'd ever heard of Episode, before Episode was invented. And I was actually planning on using that as maybe a video. I wanted to design a traditional video game. I didn't have resources to do so at the time, and I still don't. But I mean, Episode is about as close as I'm going to get to that, at least now anyway. So yeah, I had thought this was when I was writing City of the Falling Sky, and I'd come up with the idea of the Ember Effect on the side. So I actually came up with the idea when I was behind the checkout in my job in the bookstore. So when I was supposed to be shelving books or serving customers, I was actually I got a bit of printer paper and I was jotting down notes. And yeah, years later, it eventually became the Ember Effect. I think I came up with the idea for it maybe in 20. Do you know? I was probably about somewhere between 2009 and 2011, and then and then it materialized in the form of the Ember Effect in 2015, I believe. So
yeah. Oh wow. Oh, it's amazing how an idea can just stick with you, you know, and that's when you know it's a good idea. You have it and you're like, I still want to write it. Like, let's get that out. Yeah. Oh, very cool. All right. So this one's for episodes. What's your favorite underappreciated episode story?
So there's this little perfect gem of a story called Mysterious Signals by Antica. It's about the crew of a spaceship that's on a collision course with a star, and the ship's AI is malfunctioning and acting a little strange. Now, it's only 3 episodes long, and it's just like this perfectly contained thing that you can enjoy in one sitting. And I think, one of the reasons I love this story is because it defies expectations of what you would find in an episode. It goes against all the rules that would make something popular. So it's too short. It's hard sci-fi. It's on a spaceship in space, and it doesn't have any romance in it at all. And it's just, I love romance stories like anybody else, but to find something like this on episode, it was really refreshing. Also, the directing is on point, and there are mini games, kind of like the ones that I put into the Ember Effect. It was written before overlays were available to everybody, so the author made really clever use of backgrounds. And I actually, when I was reading it, thought that she had used overlays, but she hadn't. It was really cool trickery with backgrounds. And there's also multiple endings affected by your performance in the minigames. So yeah, definitely check it out, guys. It is really cool. Mysterious Signals, it's called.
Oh, that's really cool. I'm gonna have to check that out. That is an excellent answer to that question. Very, very cool. Huh. All right. So what's your favorite thing? So, you obviously write episode stories. That's why we're all here. And you write traditional stories as well, the Sakura sequence. What is your favorite thing about writing episode stories? And then your favorite thing about writing novels?
Yeah, so I think my favorite thing about writing episode stories is seeing them come to life. When I was writing the Sakura sequence books, I was always imagining them as movies, and I was dreaming that one day somebody would turn one of them into a movie, so I could see it come to life. And when I started writing for episodes, I could actually see something come to life before my eyes in a audio visual way, sound effects and animation. So yeah, with episodes, it's kind of like it's already a fully living thing that's you can immediately see. You don't have to do any kind of filming and then editing or anything. It's like you just type the script and then you preview it, and there it is. It's already there. Yeah, when I first started writing for episode, I actually thought that my favorite thing was going to be the choices and the branching, because I'd loved that kind of stuff in video games in the past and in those choose your own adventure stories. And then when I had to write those things, I realized how much work goes into the branching and the choices, and that actually did not become my favorite thing. That became like at times a bit of a chore. I'm sure you can all sympathize as well. You do the same thing. It's a lot of work writing different branches for the same story, and it's confusing, really confusing at times. So no, my favorite thing about episode is seeing it come to life immediately. Yeah. So my favorite thing about writing traditional novels is being able to write passages of description. So on episodes, it is heavily frowned upon to use too much narration. So with traditional novels, often it's seen as a good thing. Not always, but often it's seen as a good thing to have a lot of description in your books. And I do enjoy writing description. And when I first started writing for episode, I really struggled actually to restrain myself from writing a lot of narrator bubbles. It was a really strange discipline, So yeah, my favorite thing about writing traditional novels is being able to write long passages of description.
Oh, very cool. Well, I often find writing for episode, it's more like writing a screenplay, and obviously directing it as well. It's more like making a TV show to an extent, whereas like writing a novel is more like, and the leaves blew in the tree and everything was gray, like it's more it's a bit more dramatic. And both are excellent, have their merits, and both are enjoyable to write. But episode is obviously representing a part of the future of writing, I think, and interactive reading. Just like I was very similar to you. I really loved the choose your own adventure stuff when I was a kid. I was really into the Animorphs, and the Animorphs brought out a choose your own adventure, and it was the best, like literally the best. And now here we have it in real life. Very cool. All right, so we have our last question for you, and this is about Glitch Girl. We want to hear a little bit about it and how it's different from your past stories. Why your current readers would like it, why new readers who maybe haven't read your stories before are gonna love it. So, tell us about it.
Sure. So, Glitch Girl, for anybody that hasn't read it yet, is the story of Grace Griffin, and she's a girl who was caught in an explosion at the launch of a robotic police force. During this explosion, she gained superpowers which allow her to control electronic devices without her touching them. The city is currently being taken over by an evil villain named Zero, and Grace needs to step up and use her powers to become the superhero that the city needs. So it is a bit different to my other stories, even though it's still fantasy. It's a bit different to my other stories because this is a full-on like genre superhero story in the style of like a Marvel or a DC one. I'm talking like full-on, capes and stuff. In my other stories, some of my protagonists do have superpowers, but the overall tone has been more like fantasy or general sci-fi, whereas this is like pure comic book. So if you like the Avengers and like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this should be right up your street. This is also different in terms of the directing. This is the most advanced visual directing that I've ever done. And also the episode team fully scored this one with an original soundtrack and original sound effects.
Oh, cool.
So apparently this was the first time that they've done this. I believe, I don't know, I might be wrong there. So in terms of like the production value, it's higher than my previous stories. For my existing fans who have read my other ones but haven't read this yet, I think you'll enjoy it because it does include my signature plot twists. It hopefully also does include the same kind of light-hearted humor that's usually in my stories, alongside the more serious kind of plot elements. For readers who've never read any of my stories before, this definitely is a good entry point, I think, because the episode team have been working very closely on this one with me. They have been trimming out a lot of extra dialogue and a lot of stuff that might have been a bit too heavy. So they were trying to make it as snappy and as accessible as possible. So whereas something like the Ember Effect might be quite dense for somebody that doesn't generally read the kind of stuff that I write, Glitch Girl should be very easy to get into.
Oh, great. Well, I hope everybody checks it out. I hope everybody catches the sci-fi bug, and we need a sci-fi contest next after this thriller contest, and get everybody floating around in space. That'd be good.
I would read that in happy.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining me today, Joseph. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. This was really cool, and I hope that you're having a great time in England, which sounds really exotic to a lot of us. And living life. Very, very cool.
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you so much for hosting this interview, conducting it, and setting it all up. I've really enjoyed it, and thank you for everything. And I hope that you enjoy your time in France.
I will very much. Thank you, and I'll talk to you next time.
You too, and thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for watching.